Hello, you're listening to Send in the Experts with Georgina Durrant. This podcast is all about teaching and supporting children and young people with special educational needs and disabilities, SEND. I'm Georgina Durrant. I'm the host of this podcast, brought to you by Twinkle SEND. As a former teacher in Senko myself, I wanted to create a platform to share some of the amazing things that my guests are doing to support learners with SEND. So whether you're listening on your commute, tuning in whilst walking your dogs, or curled up on the sofa with a nice cup of coffee, thank you so much for joining us. In this episode, I'm joined by the wonderful, energetic and inspirational Sue Atkins. Sue is an internationally recognised parent expert, broadcaster, speaker and author of the Amazon best-selling books, Parenting Made Easy, How to Raise Happy Children and Raising Happy Children for Dummies, as well as the author of the highly acclaimed Parenting Made Easy resources. She regularly appears on the flagship ITV show This Morning, as well as Good Morning Britain and Sky News, and is the parenting expert for Disney Family and many BBC radio stations around the UK. She is also author of the highly acclaimed Can Do Kids journal, Discover Your Confidence Superpower. Hi Sue, lovely to see you again. How are you?
I'm very well, thank you. Thank you for having me on.
You're very welcome. Since we last spoke, I believe you've got married, so congratulations.
Oh, yes, thank you very much.
You're welcome. So you're not only just a parenting expert, but you're also a bit of a podcast expert, as you have your own very successful podcast that I had the pleasure of being a guest on a while back. So I'll be honest, I'm feeling the pressure today, now that the tables are turned and I'm interviewing you. So would you like to tell us a little bit about your podcast?
Sure. Well, I do too, actually. I do the Sue Atkins Parenting Show, which is a free weekly podcast around all sorts of topics. And people write in to my Don't Stew, Ask Sue feature and ask me questions about anything to do with raising happy, confident kids. And then I also have the Parent Verse, which is where I interview experts from around the world. I've coming up to 5 years doing it now. So I've interviewed people, in early brain development, autism, special needs, dyslexia, moody teenagers to toddler tantrums. So you name it, I've covered it by interviewing people. So they're all available on my website or wherever you listen to your podcasts, both of them, for you to listen to. So busy.
Fantastic.
With podcasting.
Very busy. So a lot of our listeners will be teachers, and you yourself have been a teacher and a deputy head. I believe you're a teacher for 22 years, according to Wikipedia. Is that correct?
Yes. By the time it all stretched out, it was around about 25 years. So yes, I loved teaching. I never felt I did a day's work in my life, and now I don't feel I still do a day's work in my life. And I love what I do. So yeah, very, very interested in all things teaching and educational though. Still.
Yeah, can you tell us about your career then? Are you one of those people that when you were a child always wanted to be a teacher, or did you fall into the job? How did it happen?
Well, I'm trained by Tony Robbins and Paul McKenna in something called NLP, which is the study of excellence and excellent communication. And I remember doing an exercise in Florida with Tony Robbins where you went back in time and you sort of look back at your life. And I suddenly realised from the age of 5, I wanted to be a teacher or a journalist So that is so interesting to me because, I had a 22 or 25 year kind of career teaching, loving it. And then I decided after my father died, quickly followed by my mum, to do something else. I'd been teaching for a very long time. I was very, very interested in self-esteem for children. I was head of PSHE at that time as well. I've trained with Jenny Molesley. And I decided to, go sideways. I thought, I've been teaching the children for all this time, but actually walking across muddy fields one day with my dogs, I thought, when they both died, my parents, so suddenly, I thought, what did they give me? And I thought, they gave me the gift of self-esteem, hopefully not an arrogance. Yeah. And I need to work with the parents because they're the first people that give self-esteem and confidence to kids. So that's when all of that sort of took off. So underpinning everything that I do, and I love what I do all sorts of variety of things, is actually raising a happy, confident, resilient child that grows up to be a happy, confident, toddler, then a teenager, then an adult, and eventually then, a positive parent. That's what it's all about for me, really, leaving a legacy behind me.
That's wonderful. Absolutely wonderful. If you went back to being a deputy head or a teacher now, is there anything you would do differently now that you've been teaching you've been teaching parents and that sort of things. Is there anything you would do differently?
No, I wouldn't do anything differently. I just loved what I did. I was very enthusiastic. I taught in both the state sector and the private sector. I've worked with children of all sort of backgrounds and with additional needs and all sorts of things. And I look back at my time and I think, well, I always put my heart and soul into everything that I do. I tend to do 110%. So I look back at all of that and I loved teaching. I remember one time, many, many years ago, I was teaching young kids in a primary school. I remember going into the staff room. It was a Wednesday and it was raining and it was November. And it struck me as, I'd just do this even if I wasn't paid, because I just love doing it. So it's always stayed with me that I've been very blessed to enjoy what I do, because I know lots and lots of people don't enjoy their jobs. But teaching has come under such pressure. I've still got loads of friends who are teachers. And, through this pandemic, my goodness me, I want to hold out a helping hand and a pat on the back, because they have been through so much and done so much to help and support children's learning at home. And, without being too political, the government, beat them with a stick. And I like to sort of on my Twitter feed at times really praise and celebrate the hard work that all teachers do, because you don't go into teaching, it's not a hugely well paid job. It's more of a vocation. No. And I just want to pat people on the back for all the difficult times that we've been through.
Yes, absolutely. So you have expertise in teaching and in parenting. What can parents learn from what works in teaching, and what can teachers learn from what works in parenting?
Oh, goodness. Communication, I think, is the respect, that's the key energy of a family, and respect, of course, as well. And I think we've got 2 ears and 1 mouth for a reason. And when you're a teacher, you listen before speaking sometimes. And sometimes with parents, they don't always listen to understand. They're always kind of listening to rescue or to tell or to nag. So my advice, I have a technique that I have in all my CDs and MP3s, they are now, they're not CDs, around the pause button technique. You can just put in Sue Atkins pause button. It's videos, it's written up, but it's about, imagine you have you've got this remote control in your hand. You press pause button. Sometimes when something's going a bit wrong, you take a physical step back and it gives you that split second to think, right, now what am I going to say? What am I going to do? If I, shout at the kids, this will damage the relationship. Am I just going to lose my temper, or am I going to be very specific in what I need them to do next? So the pause button technique is such a simple one, but it really does get you back in control of some of the things, because otherwise you're not responding to your kids, you're reacting. So I talk a lot about the difference in that, so that actually you're a kind of a more positive parent, more aware of what you're doing. And sometimes if you imagine you have a camcorder on your shoulder, it's observing you, because kids take their lead from you, actually. So if you're rude to them, they're going to be rude back to you, no doubt. So it's about conscious parenting, if you like.
Yeah, absolutely. And that strategy, I imagine, with the pause button could equally be used in teaching, couldn't it? If you've got a class and you're struggling and taking that step back and thinking, how am I going to respond to this class? What am I going to do? I think that's really important. So you started as a teacher, you were a deputy head, and then you went into being this parenting expert. And one of the things I know my team were quite interested in is your time on This Morning. So you've been a parenting expert on This Morning. Are you able to tell us anything about what it's like in the studio?
It's really enjoyable. Everybody's very lovely. Everyone's very friendly. I used to love doing it with Eamon and Ruth, because we got on very well together. He's so relaxed. He's been doing it a long time. And I love live TV, and I loved the live aspect of answering questions. I'd go in the green room and I'd meet all sorts of wonderful people, from Frankie Valli to Ryland to all sorts of people. And then they'd give me the questions and I'd have a little look through, and I said, well, let's do these. And then we'd just go live and I would answer the questions, and I thrive on that. And then that led to me being Disney's parenting expert, sitting on their sofas for over a year and a half or more, still doing that, where I just take questions and answer them and reassure parents, really. And I just thrive on live TV. And some of my friends go, I don't know how you do that. I just love it. So anyway, there we are.
I imagine some of it is from being a teacher as well, isn't it? That sort of, you're live all the time in the classroom being a teacher with questions. You've got to respond all the time you're being observed, same sort of
Yes.
different audience.
No, you're right.
Yeah.
And you're sort of performing, aren't you? I mean, you're authentic
Yeah.
and honest. But if you're a born communicator and you love what you do, it's about actually not about me. It's always about the other person. I thought, well, how can I help them? How can I serve them? It's the same with kids. When they didn't get something, you don't shout at them or get cross and say it the same way. You think to yourself, if you're a good teacher, now they're not getting this. What can I do differently? Are they kinesthetic? Are they auditory? Should I repeat it in a different way? You look at that. So it's all about communication, really.
Yeah, absolutely. So when you were on this morning, did you ever give parenting advice to like Phil and Holly?
Oh, Eamon, definitely, many times.
Eamon,
yeah,
brilliant. Did they ask you?
Yeah, because he had a son who he was kind of, sort of at loggerheads a little bit with, and I just said to him, "But that sounds fantastic. He sounds like a leader." And he went, "God, I'd never thought of it like that." So we chatted about his sort of teenage son, and he reframed that and thought that was helpful. So, and Holly, I remember when I first used to be on there with her, she said, "Oh my God, I go into restaurants and people go, oh, that's Holly Willoughby, and her kids are running around and not eating their broccoli. Can you give me a hand?" So I gave her that was easy peasy lemon squeezy button. So she uses that. So does, what's the one that does all the handiwork? Kirsty. That's it.
Kirsty, yes. So you've written quite a few books now. How many books have you written in total?
I've written 4 published books by by Random House and Jessica Kingsley Publishers, but I've got absolutely stacks of ebooks and books that I've written to go alongside my MP3 download. So 4 published books by recognised publishers. Yeah.
One I wanted to talk particularly about was your Can Do Kids Journal, which is brilliant. And I think it'll be particularly useful for our listeners of teachers and Senkos to use with children, especially at the moment. Would you agree that it would be a useful resource?
Yes, because having a can-do attitude for me is sort of like a growth mindset, but it's having that mindset of having a go, failing forward, making mistakes, getting back up. And goodness knows, poor kids, they've had such a torrid time, some of them, not all of them, during these last 2 years. And the idea that, you build resilience, because it is a muscle, self-esteem and confidence, you can teach it. You do need to practice it, because if you don't use it for a while, it can wobble. And that's the same as us when we're, as adults as well. So the Can Do Kids Journal was when I used to go into schools and run workshops around this kind of thing. And I thought, well, let me write it into kind of a journal so you can do the exercises, not in any order, just have fun doing them. They're all fun to get kids thinking. And it came from, I was on the board of Kidsania up in London. And I just watched this child when I was going round with Gare Grouse, my pal. And this little person wouldn't have a go at climbing up something because they really wanted to, but they hadn't got the confidence to try. And that's when it dawned on me. I think I needed to do a Can Do Kids Journal to teach kids that muscle, that try. Doesn't matter if you fail. It's not dangerous on something like that either. It's all safe. But life is about having a go. Otherwise, you're always sitting back and, life passes you by. So, the Can Do Kid Journal has lots of exercises in it that are fun to do, that can be done at home, done with grandma, done in schools with teachers. And, I hope it helps. And lots of people seem to say it does. It's won awards now and everything too.
Yeah, absolutely brilliant. So would it be useful in particular for children with SEND, for children with special educational needs and disabilities?
Yes, of course, because then, it depends on the age and their ability and whether you sit with them and do the exercises together or start them off or get them thinking or get them talking or supporting them. Yes, so the Can Do Kids Journal, Discover Your Confidence Superpower, is ideally suited to children with additional needs. They may do it in their own time, and that's absolutely fine. It's not a race, is it? It's not a rush. But the skill sets within that, the activities are all thought through to build that resilience and that confidence and that attitude to life to try.
Absolutely. And how would you describe the word resilience then? How would you define resilience? Because it is a tricky one. A lot of people use it and don't say what it actually means.
Well, it's not the absence of fear, but it is working through things. And when you've had a setback, you get back up and you have another go, or you go round something, or you go under it, or you go over it. You look at life with all its obstacles, but you don't let it defeat you. You might have a rest, you might have a recovery period of something, but you just bounce back from for me, resilience is bouncing back from setbacks.
For children who might be aware that they're working below the level of their peers in a classroom, how can you avoid that impacting on their self-esteem? What sort of tips would you give teachers to sort of help those children with their confidence, with their resilience, if they're constantly trying their absolute hardest but they're not achieving the same as their peers?
Well, that's all about how you handle all of that within the classroom in personal social health education as well, about not making kids feel judged. And it's about inclusivity and making sure that children are not compared. And when you sit them on tables, make sure that they're not next to, in groups of certain things, so that children know, because they know anyway themselves if they're struggling or they're slower at things. But this is about tolerance, respect, and supporting a child with additional needs, and not trying to push them through any hoops or tick any boxes for the government on Ofsted. And it's the same thing with parents as well. You'd be amazed what you can achieve if you just keep at it. The tortoise and the hare. It is about consistency. Keep doing it. And what are the goals for yourself? Don't compare. No kids should compare themselves actually to other people. When my children used to play in the garden, my son is 2 years older than my daughter, and they used to ride bike. And one of the things I remember, this game that they both started to play, was Will started it off with this race around the different parts of the garden, but he had his timer on his watch. So instead of him trying to beat her, because he would always beat her because he was bigger and stronger, he was older than her, they then did the timing. So they were actually playing together but timing themselves and trying to beat themselves their own time. Now he was only about 8 or 9 at that time, and she was about 7 or so. And I remember thinking, that's brilliant, that is, because it's about playing together and alongside, but recognising that actually it's not a competition, because he would always perhaps win it, so it's the same mentality. You create an atmosphere in the classroom where it's inclusive, and you do sometimes need to remind the rest of the class perhaps about other children and their additional needs and what that means, not to patronise them, to educate them. And I mean, I'm a fan of Strictly, and that has just been amazing, that whole series,
hasn't it,
with Rose, who I really championed and wanted to win, actually, although Johannes as well, for all sorts of reasons, and diversity. You had the whole gambit there. All three of those finalists were wonderful. So that's doing great things for all sorts of people, to realise that you can overcome things. You won't all win Strictly Come Dancing. That would be ridiculous. But what she showed is so much determination, resilience. And if you have a can-do attitude, you can improve on what you can do yourself. And you will surprise yourself. And then you'll have a huge buzz of self-esteem.
Yeah. And I suppose it's building in the classroom. When we think back to the classroom, it's building that can-do attitude that everyone thinks everybody else can do as well. It's not just about themselves, but the can-do attitude of the class, and believing in each of the strengths and what everyone's capable of doing.
Oh, absolutely. And that comes right the way down through an ethos of a school, or you create that in your classroom.
Yeah, lovely. Do you think your book and these strategies to help with self-esteem and confidence are even more useful at the moment during this pandemic, and with all the upheaval that children have, well, we've all had, but children in particular have had? Do you think it's even more vital for parents and teachers to be working on children's self-esteem and resilience at the moment?
Yes, and I have a voice, I suppose, on Twitter and things like that because of what I do. And for me, it's not about, they were talking all the time in the summer about catching up. Well, what are we catching up with, and why are we trying to catch up to? Because it's all about mental health and well-being for me. That is your priority. It's Maslow's hierarchy of needs. Why are you so busy trying to get here when you're not looking at the fundamentals? And some children have had a torrid, awful time. They haven't had, that's not me, that's my dog. And they haven't had,
Is he sneezing?
I'm not quite sure. But it's about making sure that children are supported through this time. They're nurtured, that they, you can build memories that last a lifetime of fun as well. And it has been uncertain, but of course children will take their lead from you. And teenagers as well, they may look like they're coping okay. So just sort of tap into them and listen to them and say, how you're doing. Don't rush into rescue. Don't try and solve all their problems. But sometimes they get hold of the wrong end of the stick, or they're getting misinformation, or they're on social media and their friends are winding them up.
Yeah.
So it's just tapping into that sometimes, creating moments where you can have a chat without it being too intense, perhaps walking the dog or driving in the car somewhere. You open up a conversation So you just check in on their mental health and their well-being as well.
Yeah, that's really important. I suppose teachers could use that when in the classroom or just at break time, perhaps just being available for teenagers to have someone to talk to. I think it's really important.
Yes, I think
and having
so.
that space and that time.
And playtime as well. When you're outside, if you're a primary teacher, you're just going around if you're on duty, and you can be informally chatting to a child and just sort of keeping an eye on them. You don't have to make it all important. But if you're a good teacher, your antennae is up all the time noticing certain things.
That's a very good point. Yeah. So your other books then, so we've spoken quite a lot about your Can-Do journal for kids, which, like we said, I think will be particularly useful for our listeners. You've written some other books. Would you like to tell us about each of those as well?
Yes, I've got an award-winning journal just recently called the Divorce Journal for Kids, because unfortunately the pandemic has put a lot of strain on relationships and parents as well. And I do focus and specialise in helping parents through divorce, through my 6-week coaching program and all the sorts of things I've written. I've written loads and loads of articles about that on my website under the blog section you can look at if you're looking at it. But children, I remember when this was published, actually, it made me quite emotional. I remember this little girl called Becky. She won't thank me if she's listening to this. God knows how old she is now. But anyway, she was 8 then. And she was lovely. And she said to me, but nobody's listening to me. And I thought, I was so struck by that. She was only 8 and she's very eloquent and all the rest of it. And so 20 years later, I wrote the Divorce Journal for Kids, because that was for her, because it's a safe place to look at divorce positively as well, look at all the good things about being in a family and things that you do like and how things change in life and how you have to learn to adapt. And then it takes you on a journey so you can express and look at your own emotions, look at and understand. So they can do it on their own, but they can also do it with grandma or dad or mum, so that it's a safe space to sort of explore how they're feeling, because everybody goes through, I wrote about this called the 7 stages of handling a divorce, based on the Kubler-Ross grief module, actually. But, we do turn a corner after a divorce and you do rise again like a phoenix. But everyone will be at different stages, from grandma to mum to dad to, auntie to you to your brother. And it's important that children feel heard and process their emotions properly too. So that's the Divorce Journal for Kids. Again, exercises and fun stuff, but actually would be a great place to, explore their emotions and their process of handling it.
It's a really good point, because you've got a lot of people focus on the grown-ups, don't they, and the adults going through the divorce and how it's affecting them. But actually the children are just as impacted, if not more impacted by it. And to have that space to be, even just to show them, but with this journal, that we are listening to you, we are respecting your views, we know it's impacting on you. It's like the gift of recognition, isn't it? Recognition that it's impacting on them. Yeah,
because I had another little girl fairly recently, actually, Ruby, who said to me, well, why is it I have to move every weekend? Why doesn't mum and dad?
It's a very good point.
And actually, I'm interviewing a guy on my podcast I heard him on the Jeremy Vine show, actually. So I sort of texted into him and said, would you like to come on my podcast? He talks about nesting, which is actually, if you can manage it, and they did do it, it's quite a while they had done it, and it's their kids are grown up with it, where you have one base where, he does a week, the kids stay there all the time. He does a week there, then the wife or the ex-wife rather comes in and does a week there. So that whole point is that the kids stay in the same place and the parents rotate, but not everyone can afford to necessarily do that. But it's another option,
Yeah, that's a clever idea. So nesting, in the sense that it's like the baby birds in the nest and the mother and the father are coming back in two. I love that idea. Yeah. Like you say, it might not be practical for everybody, but would help with the continuity for children. Yeah,
I mean, that's it. You've got to think out of the box sometimes, and you look at your own circumstances. So, of course, that's the whole area of divorce, which is everything is unique and different, and there will be a spike. There's loads of research showing that actually, once we're coming out, and then we come in, and then we go up and we go down, and we're all over the place. It's putting a great strain on relationships. So, yes, I wanted to be able to help the kids during that turbulent time.
Wonderful.
Really.
So your other books then, would you tell me about another one, please?
Yes, okay. Well, Parenting Made Easy, How to Raise Happy Children was my second book, and all of it's about positive parenting, and none of it's about judgment and finger pointing. And I'm trained as a coach, so I ask lots of good questions to help people find their own answers, really. And people find that quite strange. Oh, that's an interesting question. Well, yes, because not all one size fits all. Everyone has a slightly different way of doing things. So I ask questions that help you think about it. Then, of course, I can take off that hat and put on my other one, which says, well, this worked very well, here, or I've studied this and this could try this and all the rest of it. So, yeah, the Parenting Made Easy, How to Raise Happy Children is bursting with all sorts of stuff like that, but also practical things from toddler to teenager, looking at communication and confidence and sibling rivalry and all those sorts of things that, just ordinary problems that families have when they're growing up in a family environment. And my first book I've always been invited to write my books. Actually, I haven't pitched, but the first one I was invited to write was Raising Happy Children for Dummies, one in the famous Black and Yellow series. And I love doing that because there's a formula to that, and you can dip in and out, like all of my books, actually. You can dip in and out of them, but there was a real structure to there. And I like the one at the end where it says, 10 simple things you can do every day. So dip in and out of that. There's a special needs section, of course, into that one as well, an additional needs one, and all sorts of things. I try to be as practical as I can because I've raised 2 children myself. Some people that we all know who've written books and stuff don't have kids. And whilst I don't criticize that, it is, I do know what it's like to get up in the night to a sick child and watch your 18-year-old turn right out of a junction when she's just passed her test. And you think, hope she makes it. Hope she makes it to Auntie Betty. So anyway, yes. So my stuff tends to be practical because I know what it's about.
And drawing on life experiences, I imagine on your teaching experience as well.
And storytelling. I tell a lot of stories about my own life, how they, someone said to me, you've always got loads of metaphors in there. I suppose I just bring things in that would sort of explain a story or explain something I'm talking about and hopefully, show people the way this is how you could do it.
Yeah, and much more relatable that way because people can put themselves in the same situation and think, that's what would I have done if that had happened to me, and how will I, handle that situation if it does happen again. I think that's good. So your parenting club, so you work with parents as part of your Sue Atkins Parenting Club, and I know that's bursting with sort of quick win videos. It's got monthly webinars and regular Facebook lives. I don't know how you do all this stuff, by the way, Sue. When I'm saying all of these things that you do, you sound like an incredibly busy lady. But so can schools use your parenting club as well? There
was a section for teachers, yes. And I've written actually an MP3 download, which is really comprehensive. It's almost like a real coaching program called the Teachers Bouncing Back Toolkit, because I looked at time management, I looked at meetings, I looked at being the best you can be. So I put it all into the Teachers Bouncing Back Toolkit. That's something that's very helpful for teachers, actually. First-hand advice about when I was a deputy and also when I was mentoring other people. So I put it all in. It's just that thing about you learn it all and then you sort of can teach it to other people. And it's one of those things that I like with it's an MP3 is you can, when you're running out or you're driving, you can listen to it, or you can grab a cup of coffee and sit and write down some of the, I asked some good questions to help you find some answers. And it's very popular amongst teachers.
Yeah, brilliant. So your actual parenting club, I was thinking people, if you had some teachers could use it to then sort of explain to the parents they're supporting that it would be useful for them as well. Is that something that happens?
Yeah, you can do that. But I wrote for Parent Mail for a long time as well around aspects of, handling parents from a teacher's point of view. I was sort of building that bridge across. And the parenting club is for parents, really. There is a sort of a section where teachers would find it handy if you had a difficult parent or you wanted to look at parental engagement, for example. I've written a lot about that and gave a talk at the NEC around parental engagement. So anything like that. But, of course, teachers are parents too. So there's a whole wealth of stuff there for everyone.
Brilliant. So thank you ever so much for joining us. Have you got any links or anything where you can send people to you? So if they're looking for these books, if they're looking for some webinars, if they're looking for any of these resources, where can they go to find them? Can you give us some links?
Well, you can go to thesueatkins.com, the one and only, because there's a lady called Sue Atkins sitting on a yacht and it's not me. So I am thesueatkins.com. There's a whole wealth of things in my blog. I mean, they're not really blogs. They're just like full-blown articles a lot of the time. All my things are in the shop. You can explore the webinar, you can explore the podcast, the parent verse. It's all there for you to explore. And actually, Positive Toddler Roadmap, which is I've recorded 41 videos actually and 41 audios, and also then 28 modules around raising a happy, confident, resilient toddler undamaged by the pandemic, because I volunteer on Fridays at my local library to do rhyme time. And that's where babies and mums all come, and carers and granddads, to sing nursery rhymes.
I remember going to one of them with my own children at the local library. It's a lovely thing to do. So I like that you're doing that.
I love doing it. And, because language is so important. And, they've missed out a bit, some kids, because of the lockdowns that were happening. These were babies that were born in lockdown. Also, they've missed out on the sociability side of, singing and playing with other little ones. Yeah. So I love to do that. And that's where, I talk about in the Toddler Roadmap all about the importance of language and speech development, play, sociable side, introducing a new baby to, when you've got a toddler who's a bit jealous of the new baby. So it's the whole gambit really. To that's where my energy is going into. So if you're interested in that, check out the Positive Toddler Roadmap that I've done. But it's all over there on thesueatkins.com. So explore and come and say hello on Twitter. I'm Sue Atkins on there. Instagram, I'm Sue Atkins 18. LinkedIn, I'm everywhere like everybody else is nowadays.
Fabulous. Thank you ever so much for your time, Sue. We are putting this out in the new year, but what people might not realise is this is actually Christmas Eve that Sue has let me have to speak to her, which is very kind of her. I'm sure she's very busy preparing for her children.
I'm actually surrounded.
Thank you ever so much.
Yeah, we've done the shop, so I'm actually surrounded by all the cashew nuts.
Oh, I love it. Thank you ever so much. You've been a brilliant guest. I really appreciate it.
It's my pleasure.
What a brilliant guest. Isn't she great? I think she's given us all the links, but do make sure you check out Sue Atkins' website and her wonderful books that she has written, as well as listening to her podcasts as well. Thanks again for listening to Send in the Experts with me, Georgina Durrant. Please tell your friends about our podcast, share that you've been listening on social media, and listen again next time. Thanks.